I
Krista,
am
are you-
starting the live
Okay.
stream.
Thank you.
You are live.
Thank you. I'm going to call the CR&T meeting to order, the date of September 14th at 4:45 p.m. Let it be noted that all board members are present, plus our county manager, Paul Miller, and our Chamber Tourism Director from the Menominee, Kimberly Strickford, and of course, Julie, our county clerk, is our recording secretary, and so I always appreciate the good job she does. So, and thank you to Krista again for making sure that this is all in good working order. And I see Ashley DeMuth from the Chamber has joined us too. Welcome, Ashley. I'm going to open start by, we have a roll call, but the approval of the minutes. If you've read the minutes from the August 10th meeting, that was also via teleconference. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? I hope you've had a chance to read them.
Mr. Chair, there's two sets. Are you going to approve them separately or individually? There's minutes from September 1st and then also August 10th.
Oh, that's a good point. We have two sets of minutes. Thank you, Julie. August 10th was the first one we need to look at. And then if you've read those, and then if you look at September 1st, unless you want to approve them separately, I would ask you to look at them again, and maybe we can approve all of them, both of these for September 1 and August 10th. Is that okay with everybody? You've had a chance to read the minutes now then? Any corrections or additions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
I so move,
Larry approved.
Chair.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Anna seconded. Thank you very much. Okay, all in favor of the approval of the minutes, September 1 and August 10th, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Before we go, I do not have our area extension director here today, but I want to make some comments about why, even though we have no action today, why I think it's very important that we have this meeting today. I don't expect it's going to take very long, but I'm looking for feedback from each one of you on the committee so that, and Paul Miller is on, and now I see Dave Bartlett, our county board chair, is on board too. So welcome, Dave. I want everybody to kind of know where we're sitting right now. And next Wednesday at 1 o'clock, the executive board is meeting again. It's tough times going through this budget, and we're meeting again. And there'll be things I want you to know about or talk about today before I go to that meeting next Wednesday at 1. And then the Dunn County Economic Development Board is meeting at 4:30 next Wednesday. And then you all know that we have a county board meeting that evening at 7 o'clock. So I think today I'm going to throw some things out to the CR&T committee for your reaction. And Paul and Dave Bartlett, anytime that you have a question or we call on you, we welcome you, because I need to get it very clear from the CR&T committee and what has been proposed to them right now from our county manager. So with that, then I'm going to move right in. I got an email early this afternoon from Stacy Wigfield, who's our interim executive director, and he had to end up going over to Mayo at Eau Claire because he's got an infection in his foot. And the doctor is going to see him this afternoon. He was worried about the infection moving up his leg. And so I excused him from this meeting, but I'll share with you what he was going to say today. And he might even have to stay overnight. We don't know yet. But you know, when your health is concerned about getting into your leg. But we didn't know that up until early this afternoon when you called the doctor and the doctor says, get over here, this afternoon. So moving ahead then, I wanted to share with you a little bit about what our executive director would have shared with you. If you go out to the industrial park right now, you've probably seen that the Ellsworth Creamery is breaking dirt already for the new plant that they're building. And of course, they're going to have a retail cheese factory, as you know. And it's going to be an awesome project. Lowell Prange, the city administrator, indicated that the Dunn County EDC should be the one to present when they're ready a shovel or a ribbon cutting or a shovel, groundbreaking, we'll call it. And we're kind of waiting, even though they have started moving some dirt, because we would like to go out there and welcome the Ellsworth Creamery with their great new facility that we think is pretty awesome. So that should be coming up within a week, hopefully, or so, or certainly within the month of September, even though you might see some action taking place. The other thing that Stacy Wigfield asked me to share with you is that he'd been talking to many people, and I've even heard from some of them, thanking us for the work that we've been doing and working with broadband expansion by support of writing letters and to all those that are applying for grants so that they can expand. And the most recent one we heard from was some people that live right on Pheasants Crossing. If you remember Pheasants Crossing is where 24/7 is expanding fiber north of the city all the way up through the old F past Cottage Wineries, coming back to 125, and then coming back south again to Atlasta Farms, Atlasta Road rather, and then they're going in there and expanding fiber to all these people. These people are excited. And they wanted to express their appreciation for everything that has been done to help. And the town of Stanton is very happy about it too, because much of this goes through their township. But it also includes township of Menominee a little bit and a little touch of town of Tainter in that area. So I said I'd pass that on to you. There are some new broadband grants that will be coming up now. The governor announced $30 million from the state that many of these providers will be applying for the grants so that we can get more broadband expansion here in Dunn County. We expect to write letters of support again and showing them that we're not only telecommuter forward certified, but broadband forward certified. And this is one of the reasons why our committee here, remember, proposed that we have $15,000 in the budget for broadband expansion. And that $15,000, while we didn't be real specific, we wanted it to match some townships so that they would say, now we townships are putting some money into it, small amount, but it helps get the grant. And the county now is stepping up to the plate and following along with us on this. So that $15,000 was kind of seed money that we were proposing that we should show, yes, we've done all this other stuff through the help of Bob Colson especially, and Eric Turner, and Stacy with Dunn County EDC to get this done. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that today, the broadband expansion that is being talked about at the executive committee. And finally, I would say to you that Dunn County EDC wants to hear how you feel about it, because Paul is here, and I'll be calling him on here in a minute, is made a recommendation to the executive board that we do not fund Dunn County EDC, $70,000. And that's slightly more than it was last year because we're now paying rent to the city. And that's roughly $6,000 a year. And so it really would be a little less money than we had to function with last year. Now that's being recommended that that Dunn County doesn't put any money into Dunn County EDC. It's also being recommended that Dunn County not put any money into broadband. And I understand that. We got to balance the budget. But I'm going to tell you now what bothers me. Only me. You're all an individual and you need to speak up. But what does bother me, then there's a recommendation in there for $10,000 that goes to the Greater Menominee Development Corporation, and they only serve the city of Menominee in that area. Nothing to do with broadband, nothing to do with rural tourism. That way we're going to work with the Chamber of Commerce here, and we're going to continue on that way. Now I'm going to stop for a minute because I see that Catherine is with us. And Catherine, I didn't think you were on, so I started the meeting. And so in fairness with the budget, that's why I moved ahead, Catherine, to start getting into these budget things. Now I'm going to stop right there because according to our agenda right now, I should be calling on our area extension director for her report. So Catherine, I apologize. I didn't think you were on the line right away, or I would have started out right with you. Can you hear me, Catherine?
I can. And
You're on.
my apologies. I just couldn't log on. So I've been listening since the beginning of the meeting through the link, but I just logged on. So I apologize. And it's not helpful for your flow of the meeting. So I do apologize to everybody. Mine is very, very brief, and then I'll log off here. You've got an update from the educators and the highlights. We do thank everybody who was able to make our Area 6 meeting, and I am still working on putting together just some of the follow-up resources, including the link to the meeting. So if you weren't able to make it, or you want to review another Zoom in your life, you'll have that link available. Last and not least, we are starting to do very minimal in-person programming, particularly with 4-H, and we're working through the logistics of the state public health guidance that excuse me, the university is following in partnership with the county health department. So it's very detail oriented, and we're working through the logistics of it. So I'm sure we will all be glad when this is all over one day. And in the meantime, as our county manager says, to be kind to one another as we work through all these details. So that's all I have. And again, I apologize for the interruption here, and would be happy to take any questions or feedback that you might have of me.
No, thank you. You do not need to thank you. I want to share too that I did attend that meeting via Zoom, which was Eau Claire and Chippewa County. It's kind of the three counties that that Catherine is the director of. And it was a pleasure because I had a chance to meet, and we shared experiences and how we share many of our extension specialists, and then how the need is to work together. And Catherine, I was expecting maybe a little bit more report on that to the group, but I want everybody to know that I did represent Dunn County at that meeting, and had a chance to talk to the people that hold the same position as I do, kind of the chair of, we name them, have different names for the committees in different counties. Larry, you remember way back when we started this, we called this the Ag Committee, and you were involved. But now it's Community Resources and Tourism. But it is our UW-Madison, Dunn County Extension people, and all the other extensions. So, Catherine, I don't know if there's any other specific, because the people can read from the Extension Dunn County Monthly Highlights that are always very thorough. Each one of our specialists report and talk about everything they do. So I urge all of you to read this again and go through it again, because our people are doing a great job of bringing all the resources from the University of Wisconsin-Madison here to Dunn County. And when you look at our budget, and it's in there of extension, and I think maybe you've all looked at this right now. And Catherine, if you want to share in here, we look at the extension budget of what we all have in here. It's $256,000 budget, $314. You all got that. Are there any comments you care to make about this, Catherine? I think everybody realized that a lot of those expenses were on a 70-30 share with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Just so everybody understands it, Catherine, maybe you could give us a brief review of how those expenses are shared.
Sure. I'd be happy to just do a very kind of high level overview, more on the report side and not on the kind of budget side, just to be mindful of how it was noticed. Extension in the past had done a split on a contract. The old contract used to be called a 133 contract, and now we have a 136 contract. The old contract was a 60-40 split where the county invested 60% and of the fees and for each educator. Now we have a fee for service, so counties don't invest into a particular educator, although counties are very much included in part of, selecting educators when they are in the hiring process. But we really look at that whole fee for service model. So for example, in Dunn County, you have an educator whose specialization is in farm financial management and really good at that work. However, has some just natural limitations like we all do, that not an expert in everything. So she can call on her colleagues across the county lines who do specialize in things like crops and soils or dairy or livestock management. And Dunn County doesn't pay anything additional for that because you've already bought into an educational fee for 1.0 full-time equivalency of an individual. So our educators really work quite well across county lines, whether it's that specialization or specialization from an expert who's on campus. In kind of aggregate, every dollar that's invested into extension from the county side, extension, from, at least here in Dunn County, we can multiply that anywhere between $3 to $5 per $1 of levy through grants, additional services from the university, partnerships, volunteer management. One of the things I shared Margaret shared at the Area 6 meeting, who is our horticulture educator. I think you invest around $13,000 or so for that shared county position. And I don't have the exact dollar amount, so I will make sure you have it in that update. But it's, oh gosh, it's a lot more than what you invested. And I really hesitate to say the number because I don't have it memorized off the top of my head. So it is a really good investment that you receive. And, extension works in partnership for kind of the long-term issues that the county is trying to address through local needs assessments, in addition to being available to emerging issues that may come up. And then, of course, working in partnership with the state since they are state employees. So I hope that's helpful, if maybe that's what you're looking for, Chair Anderson.
Yes, exactly, Catherine. Thank you. If any committee members ever want more on that later, we can do that at another time. But I wanted everybody to realize that it is a shared, like you see, for service. And we share it with the other counties. And in Margaret's case, we share with Polk County as well. Otherwise, the others are pretty well Chippewa, Eau Claire, and Dunn, except for Margaret. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Now, with your approval, without objection, I would like to probably, because we have Kimberly on here and Ashley DeMuth, and it was brought up a little bit about, and Paul even talked about how we could get some help on rural tourism from the Wisconsin, West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning. Remember back when I turned around and I asked Jim Zahns, who is our vice chair here. He's had a lot of experience with working with different media. And he even at one time brought to us, remember something we would talk about, it looked like a magazine, Done and Done, or Come to Done. It was more than the city, what the chamber is doing. And we wanted to expand it kind of out to the rural parts of Dunn County with all the things that are going on. I had the wonderful privilege, I'm just going to say, going to the Vino Cappuccino last Saturday night in Elk Mound. And wow, it was a wonderful experience. And saw a lot of people from around the county, the village president of Elk Mound, and a lot of different people there. It had about, I suppose, altogether, spaced out well, but altogether, I don't know. I left and they tell me they went on for quite a while afterwards, but that's the sort of thing we're trying to help promote a little bit in Dunn County, are all these places. And we would work with Kimberly a great deal in the chamber if we can get a tourism thing going this year. And Jim Zahns agreed if he would chair that, and I would then ask Kimberly to serve on that committee, and or somebody from economic development, depending upon where that goes. And then we could probably get something started without having to spend much money. But we all want to work with the Chamber of Tourism, and we all want to make sure that that all these great places outside the city of Menominee we want them to be recognized. And we want to be able to say, come to Dunn County. We don't want to be known as a county where you just come here and go to the city of Menominee when we have awesome things here, don't get me wrong. And we have an interstate going through here. We have federal highways, 12 and 29. We have Highway 25s going north and south of Dunn County. Let's not forget that there's all kinds of places out here, and you and I know of them, and I do too. And I think one job we should be looking at next year is being able to work with that. And if Jim Zahns would agree to chair that and work with Kimberly. Kimberly has promised me, and I know she would, thank you, that she's very happy to work with us on this to expand the tourism. I know their dollars, what they're meant for, Kimberly, I know that. But I think Jim and I have talked about this a great deal. We could turn on do this without dollars, but we can still promote, and we can do a lot of things through either selling ads or whatever. But I'm saying, I am going to make this appointment to the committee and then charge you starting maybe whenever, January or earlier, with starting to come up with some plans for rural tourism in Dunn County. Now, Jim, I will ask you if you have anything else you'd like to add at this point on that.
No, I think that at least getting started with the stakeholders who are interested and could benefit from rural tourism, with at least the meeting to kind of gauge interest, see what we can plot and what we can do with limited resources and funds, and how we can actually get something started. I think that's where we need to start first.
Thank you, Jim. And Kimberly, well, or Ashley, I would ask from the Menominee, Greater Menominee Area Chamber, do you think that we might be able to make this work? Kimberly, are you there? Can you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought Ashley was speaking.
I'll call on you.
Yeah, we can definitely excited to work on stuff. I know that I've also went to Vino Cappuccino a couple weeks ago. We are doing a new destination guide for the Menominee area, so we are reaching out to a couple of those other locations outside of Menominee to participate in that this year, and they are doing an ad for the upcoming one, which is super exciting. So also kind of reaching out to other places within Menominee right now, but with effort from you guys, we'll be able to reach it at a greater level, which will be good to see. So that'll be good. And then we also are working on kiosks. I'm not sure if you guys seen them around town, but one side of the kiosk will be about Dunn County with a map and then tourist attractions and different stuff
Excellent.
on that. So moving forward, I can get your guys' feedback on updating the map or adding new stuff and changing stuff around as well.
And that is one thing, Jim,
Yes.
that's really important, is seeing this as a community collaboration, that destination guide. I think in the past you had to be a chamber member and in the city of Menominee to take part in that guide, but that is something that we did
Right.
change. So like Kimberly said, she has been reaching out to additional organizations. The funding for that, much of the funding comes from those promotional placements right out of there. So that's easy for us to make a justification to include some of the outlying communities and some of those wonderful landmarks that are throughout Dunn County and not directly in the city limits. So Kimberly has been doing a great job. The deadline for those promotional placements, I believe, Kimberly, is November 15th-ish.
Yep, so that'll be the final cutoff deadline to be able to make it in, to get it printed and set out to go in the beginning of 2021.
Well, thank you, both Ashley and Kimberly. So Jim, if there's a deadline on that, I guess my question is, does that mean we would have to have that's a deadline for what? I guess I missed that.
The destination guide that we put out about Menominee area is about
Yeah.
every 2 to 3 years, and that we're in the process of designing that right now. So the cutoff for if you want an ad within that guide would be in November. So I have reached out to quite a few of the businesses already. But if you guys have any ones that you think I might be missing, if you want to send me a list, I can definitely reach out to them if I haven't already and get going on that.
Content is in the, how much content is in the guide that focuses on different aspects of any rural tourism? Do you have anything that you can kind of enlighten us about as far as like the contents, as far as just the informational part of it, not just the advertising element?
Yeah, so there's a section kind of about like the history of Menominee. Then there's also the event centers all throughout. Some of them are not in Menominee, the hotels. And then we also talk about recreational areas. So kind of the Red Cedar Trail, Hoffman Hills, the Elk Mountain Castles. So kind of different things you can see outdoors. And then also different tourist attractions and kind of reasons of why to come to Menominee and all like the great things that we do have to offer. And we use a lot of visual images of the things to see and talk about the Mabel and kind of a wide mixture of different stuff. So it's about 20 pages of actual content. And then depending on however many ad placements we have, it's about another 5 to 10 pages, I guess, on ads. And majority of the ads are kind of using local photos and captions about different stuff that's here.
Okay.
Jim, I will ask now then, if we could maybe with this, with this virus, it's tough to meet in person. I don't know if there's some way that our committee and we could kind of meet with Ashley and Kimberly and you and I, because at this situation, I don't know how the Dunn County Economic Development Corporation would even be involved, or I hope they will, but anyway, we'll see. But in spite of that, and then one other thing I have to bring up is that I've been going out with Stacy to a few of these places in the county, and all of you are. And we went out the other day to, I'll call it the old Deepwood, because that's what a lot of you remembered as the downhill ski area in Otter Creek. And we visited with these people who moved here from Colorado, and they're planning, and they're gonna crank that up again. It's not just gonna be a downhill ski run, but cross country. And in the summertime there'll be trails, and it just one of those things again that nobody knows about, or not many people do. And then we went up to Connorsville, and up in Connorsville, they got this museum there with, it's awesome. I'm just thinking we can all come up with places. The Colfax Railroad Museum is always talking to us about trying to get more publicity. Those are just a few, and all of you could name all kinds of places. So we could get pretty excited about this, and it would be a great way to promote Dunn County. Pepin County's doing it. And almost every other county around us is doing something like this. So unless now, this kind of breaks it in, what I wanted to talk about rural tourism today. And with your permission of this committee, you think we should move ahead? I guess that's what I'm asking. No action, just I need to know if you think the timing is wrong or is the timing right? What does the committee want to do? No action, no motion, just I want to hear your feedback.
Jim?
Tom.
Here?
Oh, okay, Larry, you're on. I guess you had first. Go ahead, Larry.
Okay. Well, I think that we should continue on this, and we should still try to get a pretty good budget for economic development. And everything that I hear is that the one thing that this COVID has done is that it's pushed people out of their traditional recreational and free time activities into new things. And visiting Dunn County and museums and stuff like that is a new thing that people, I think, are going to be looking for. I mean, the sales and recreational stuff in downhill, skiing equipment and hiking is supposedly way up, we should give people a place to recreate. And Dunn County got a lot of places, and then it's good for business, it's good for Dunn County.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you. Tom, you had your hand up. Call on
Yeah,
Tom.
well, Jim, I think we did talk about this at an earlier meeting, and I think that we passed a motion in support of the idea when you brought it up. So I think it's a really good idea. I think maybe I also think that if we could do enough on a short timeline, that we could have some impact on this publication for next year. I think that would be a good approach. It seems like a real opportunity with content and advertising, at least to get our feet wet in that. So I don't know what Jim's time is like, but if there's a way to put heads together, in the next month, so we'd have a chance to do some outreach about that, I think it'd be a good first step.
Thank you, Tom. Ann, do you have any comments or you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I think this is a great idea, and I don't know if there's room on the website or if we can add locations somehow for the Menominee website to get some of those new locations and things listed.
Well, you're right, Ann, and I could follow up a little bit with that. I can't remember how long ago it was, probably 3 months ago now, that Stacy and I were out at the airport, and Kimberly or Ashley, you might want to zero in on this, because we were looking at if anybody flies in for business into the airport in Menominee, what are they going to see right away? And so we kind of brought this up a little bit. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have a kiosk or something even here at the airport here in Menominee, so that the visitors that come in by plane, even though they might be able to stay a day or two, let them know. And then there's all kinds of other ideas that we can come up with, and we'll leave that up to the committee. But I know when I talk to these people, Cottage Winery, for example, up on F, and if you've been there, haven't been there, I invite you to. However, because of the COVID-19, she closed for the summer. But she's delighted, and has shared this with me many times about now that fiber is going right by their place. And now she said she'll be able to communicate and do her business from the cottage wineries right there on F. And so while they're not able to operate this summer, she just felt it wasn't safe, wants to stay in business. And it's an awesome place to go. And she lost the whole summer of business because of this. And if we could help in any way promote those businesses during these difficult times, boy, that would be a good way for us to be helping them to stay in business by promotion. Kimberly, do you have your hand up? Yes, Kimberly, I'll call on you.
Thank you. Yes. So we kind of do have different options with the destination guide. If you guys are kind of wanting to get in on that this year yet, with timing being so limited, that you could purchase pages from our guide for this year at like a very discounted rate, or even grant opportunities from us. So we'll have more like a Dunn County insert type of in our guide for the next 2 years. So it gives you guys time to kind of think of what you want in a full Dunn County ad, or just kind of go with inserts within our guide. Just kind of an option to think about for this year for the time being. You charge them at the rate of kind of our designer fee rate per page, and kind of go from there.
Oh, Kimberly, thank you for that offer. So Jim, you heard that. And maybe we've spent enough time discussing this right now. As Tom Quinn said, we have talked about this before, but I just needed to reaffirm if we're still sitting pretty solid on how we wanted to go. And the time frame then, what Kimberly just suggested, Jim Zahns, I'll ask you to look into that. And maybe, see, our next meeting is October 12th. And I'm going to ask you at that time for an update, or maybe if you've had a chance to talk about this, and we'll put you on the agenda, Kim and Jim, to maybe if there's any progress or what you've had a chance to do. Are you agreeable with that?
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Okay,
Kimberly, maybe I'll just follow up with an email with you, and you can send me a couple of those ideas as far as options that might be available for Dunn County in the guide, and we'll kind of we'll go from there. We'll start there.
oh,
Sounds
thank
good.
you. Thank you, everybody. That will move on in our agenda then, but I really appreciate Ashley and Kimberly and for sharing this and being with us today at this meeting. Now we're going to move on, and again, I'm glad that we have our county manager, Paul Miller, and our county board chair, Dave Bartlett, on here, because I wanted you to not be surprised. And maybe you already know this, but when Julie and I talked about this meeting, I said, there'll be no action today, but there'll be a lot of good discussion. I'm only one member of this board. I only have one vote. I will be sharing what you tell me at next Wednesday's executive meeting at 1 o'clock, because we will be delving into budget more. We had one meeting already. It was very long. Budget is not easy. In fact, I've never had more sleepless nights, quite frankly, about our county budget than this year. And I've been on the county board a while. So I recognize what Paul is going through, and our chief financial officer and our county manager, county chairman, Dave Bartlett. So I wanted them to be here today. And I want to share with you, and Paul, if you'd rather do it, but I wanted to share with you what his recommendations to our executive board was. And I need to get my notes here. Dunn County EDC submitted an application of $70,000. We're also submitting a recommend to the budget committee for $15,000 for broadband. You already know about that. Our county manager at the executive meeting is recommended that we not fund either one of them. And that would save $85,000. What I'll have to say floored me, however, is that then he recommends that we contribute to the Greater Menominee Development Corporation. And I'm going to ask him to defend that, I guess, because I don't understand that. And I'm making it clear to the rest of you, because if you say that's fine, don't be surprised if you hear that you will hear at another meeting. And then remember, we are responsible for libraries, and we recommended 100% funding. That is in there at $119,158. That is intact, but that does not affect, remember, the levy. So that could not be used to help balance the budget. Extension is in there, and I'm glad to say that appears to be the same. And external organizations. And remember, way back when we used to have 12, 14 organizations, we're down to 3. We're down to Dunn County Housing, and remember, a huge need for housing outside of the city of Menominee have their own housing. This would be Dunn County Housing. I'm rounding off numbers, 46,000. The West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning, and they cut their request to $1,000, and that's just a little over, a little less than 22,000. And Dunn County EDC went in at 70,000. So I want you at this particular point to really let me know. I, for one, as I say, wanted to go to bat to at least defend the need for Dunn County economic development next year. And I'll let Paul and address this, but I'm saying I got a letter, and if I'd had him on there, Stacy Wigfield would have reported some of the things that have been done by Dunn County Economic Development Corporation that is being overlooked. Remember, our executive director was ill all of last year. He really was not effective. He was even ill a little before that, but we did the ethical thing we should do. We kept him on a payroll all the way through the end of December. He died late in December. Now we've had the virus, And it's difficult to go out there and really meeting with businesses. However, Stacy and I've been a lot with him. We've tried to do that. And I'm not going to read you the whole letter, but I gave this to all of the executive committee members, a letter that we put together. And the only executive members that didn't see this was Jim Tripp, who was not at the meeting, and Diane Morehouse, who was online. So they didn't get a hard copy of this. But I just wanted to say that we partnered with SCORE. We partnered with Workforce Development. We partnered with UW Extension. We partnered with Western Dairyland. We partnered with Momentum West. Momentum West is 7 counties in this area that do economic development. We partnered with the Greater St. Croix Valley Partnership, West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning. And when you partner with these people, I don't know who you give the credit to, but you see, somebody, in my opinion, in Dunn County needs to be there to kind of keep the ball rolling. Otherwise, Eau Claire, Chippewa, St. Croix, Pierce, Barron, they're all around us. And I think, my opinion is they'll be licking their chops if we aren't in there competing with them for some of this business. We have a lot of small villages and towns that struggle with budget. Now, the city of Menominee last year gave us $26,000 for a population of 16,000 people. Colfax gave us $2,000 for a population of 1,500 people. Boyceville, $1,000, a population of a little over 1,000. Elk Mound, same thing. So they're paying pretty well proportionally according to their population. And we don't work only with the villages outside the city. We worked with Greater Menominee Development Corporation, and I will say this finally and then shut up and let you talk. I met numerous times with the Greater Menominee Development Corporation. Our executive board of the Greater Menominee, or the Dunn County, met with them. And we have most everything in common, other than they have no interest in expanding broadband because the city has it. They have no interest in rural tourism because the chamber is doing it all in the city. There's the big difference. Also, right now, the Dunn County EDC has done all kinds of things, and I'm saying we helped get telecommuter forward certification, working with Bob Colson, who and Extension did a great job, but so did Dunn County EDC. We also helped them get a broadband forward certification, which are critical to all these providers right now for broadband expansion. I could go on because I have a 2-page letter here of everything that Dunn County EDC has done last year. And the entrepreneurial pitch that we have, and working with UW Stout and their new Compass design plan, and it goes. And finally, the former previous director, Eric, made this statement: we work more efficiently and take advantage of the strategic partnerships that make our participating group service in more demand. More demand makes for more chances for success, and the requests for assistance grow accordingly. The demands for more method to address talent shortages are what our businesses are facing while they continue to grow. We will continue to aggressive fundraising campaign from the private sector that has proven successful in the past. It takes funds to continue to do positive work that we do in the greater Dunn County area. All I'm saying to you is that you need to let me know, or the county manager, how you feel about this, because I think when we have our executive meeting next Wednesday at 1, unless I've heard otherwise, the recommendations are to not fund Dunn County EDC and not fund broadband. And I think as far as that's concerned, the others would stay the same. All right, I've said enough. And I'm trying to be objective and fair. You know where I'm coming from. Paul, you've been patient. You've listened to me. Where am I wrong? What? It's your turn.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. I'll start out by saying it's not a matter of right or wrong. It is correct that the Chief Financial Officer and I were charged with presenting to the Executive Committee of the County Board a balanced budget. And you are correct in saying it's a very difficult task. Our costs continue to go up. Our revenue continues to go down. This year of COVID is particularly painful. I suspect we'll face the same thing next year. So we are finding ourselves increasingly unable to continue to spend monies in the way that we have in the past. And this is news to nobody. The CR&T committee has watched, as you mentioned, Chairman Anderson, the availability of funds for third party or extra governmental entities dwindle and disappear. And we are faced with making hard decisions. When it comes to Economic Development Corporation, the Dunn County Economic Development Corporation, the recommendation not to fund the DC EDC next year is driven by a cold and dispassionate look at the return on our investment. And with all sympathy for what the former director of the EDC faced, was able to do and was unable to do. I try to bear in mind some really basic realities about how we're spending our money as a county. First and foremost, economic development is essential. It is essential to the future of the county. It's essential to the residents. It's essential for our economy. But we have to ask ourselves, are we making wise use of our limited resources in our economic development activities? The facts are, we've got a request now for $70,000 to support the EDC. What is the return on that investment? The EDC, Economic Development Corporation, is supposed to be a partnership between units of local government and the business community aimed at three primary things: business attraction, new business attraction, business expansion, expanding the growth of existing businesses, and business retention, when a business is thinking about relocating, trying to incentivize or create opportunities that might entice them to remain. When I look at the list provided by Chairman Anderson at the executive committee last week, I'm impressed with what EDC has done. But what I don't see is businesses that are here because of Economic Development Corporation activities. What I don't see are businesses that have expanded because of the participation and efforts of our EDC. What I don't see is businesses that indicated they might have left otherwise, but for the hard work done by an Economic Development Corporation. The other things that EDC has done, the partnerships it does by participating in West Regional, by working with the Chamber, by working with UW Stout, are all very important. But first and foremost, it's about those three things: attracting new businesses, business expansion, and business retention. And that's not something that I have seen in the time that I have been with Dunn County, which begs the question too, what would the EDC do if the county board decides to fund the $70,000? You mentioned, Chairman Anderson mentioned that the city of Menominee was the second biggest contributor, but they're pulling back on what they're contributing. They've reduced the amount that they're contributing because their own assessment was that they are not getting the return on their investment either. We were not submitted a budget by the EDC. We don't know what they're going to do. We have the notion that we would like to attract a new executive director, perhaps part-time if we can find one, but we don't know. I have the very strong suspicion, in my professional opinion, that the funding that's available through the partners is going to be enough maybe to keep the lights on at the EDC office, perhaps maintain the support staff, and little else. There simply won't be the funds. I am very skeptical that we will find a qualified economic development director for the funds that remain. And yet that is all that's all that's been proposed, is that we're going to try to find somebody. We don't know a budget because one hasn't been prepared, as far as I know, for fiscal year 21, or at least not one that I've been given an opportunity to review. So in backing up and looking at the county as a whole, its county budget, and trying to make wise use of our dwindling limited resources, I have to ask myself, is this a good investment for the county to make on behalf of economic development. And the conclusion that I came to, the CFO came to, and others, some others that I have talked to also came to, is that it's not a good use of our money. In fact, the balanced budget, which is just an idea, it isn't something that the executive committee or the county board has to endorse in whole or in part, had very little wiggle room. And in fact, if we were to add the 70,000 for the EDC, much less the 15,000 for broadband expansion, it would no longer be in balance, which means we have to cut something else. Something else would have to go. We are at the point with our budget for the county where cutting means cutting services. It means potentially cutting personnel because they're the ones who provide the services. And then finally, an important consideration, 2 years ago at the first part of 2018, the county board had a workshop where we presented the same thing. If we are forced because of budgets to have to cut because we can no longer afford to do everything we used to do, what would we cut? We had the county board go through a prioritization process where we looked at all the departments, the divisions, and the external organizations that we had supported. And we asked them to rank them high priority, second, and third. External agencies was a third priority. It was, if we have to pick between them, it was given the least emphasis. So that informed part of our recommendation as well. It's a bit of a mischaracterization, however, to say that in the budget we presented that we're turning around and saying we should support the Greater Menominee Development Corporation. In fact, what we did was recommend a donation of $10,000 to an effort that the Greater Menominee Development Corporation is spearheading, not to the organization itself. The $10,000 would be applied to expand economic development services for which the Greater Menominee Development Corporation is contracting with Cedar Corps to see if that model will yield a better return for that investment. The individual with the Cedar Corps that they are working with is an economic development specialist, many years of experience, and knows what it takes to do economic development, knows about the need to establish relationships with our existing businesses, find out where they are, what their plans are, what they see as their future and what they see as their needs, and then try to arrange to enhance and meet those needs so those businesses can remain, so those businesses can expand. That individual knows also that economic development means reaching out to the trades, to the various industries, reaching out to the site selectors to say, hey, this is Dunn County. We have a lot of amenities. We're ideally sited between the metro areas of Eau Claire and the Twin Cities. We've got good transportation corridors. We've got other amenities that businesses and their employees would find attractive, good schools, the open space, the rural recreational opportunities, et cetera. So they would promote Dunn County to those site selectors and to those industries. Even attending trade shows, each of these industries have their trade shows and the site selectors are there. So the idea of attending those, setting up a booth or a kiosk and saying, consider Dunn County is something that we have not been doing, but it is the kind of thing that Cedar Corps, the kind of services Cedar Corps is going to be preparing and providing to the Greater Menominee Economic Development Corporation. Our idea in the balanced budget we presented was to support that and see what sort of return. And if it works out, if it works well, if we do see ourselves getting good return on that investment, perhaps we can steal the idea. The fact is that Dunn County's EDC is at a crossroads. It isn't clear what it will be. And the suggestion that we're making is that maybe it's time to look at a different model for our economic development efforts. Perhaps this model of contracting with a firm that has expertise is one that will yield a better return on our investment than what we have traditionally done. I will observe too, while I understand the limited resources of the other municipalities, the fact that the city of Menominee is pulling back the amounts from the other cities is rather nominal. And importantly, the amounts from the partner businesses are rather nominal. Indicates to me at least that our partners are not seeing the value of continuing to support Economic Development Corporation. I think it's very important that we bear in mind that the Dunn County EDC is not a unit of Dunn County government. It is not an entity of the Dunn County government. It is in fact an external agency of which we are part. We're a member, but we have borne the lion's share of the cost of supporting it. And economic development, again, along the lines of business attraction, business expansion, and business retention is not something that we're seeing as a result of our efforts. We've talked a lot about broadband. Broadband is very important. Broadband is the infrastructure that's needed for economic development, particularly those that would be remote. But it is not economic development in and of itself. And in fact, this committee has discussed the fact that broadband probably doesn't appropriately reside in EDC. It's something that the county should be doing, and in fact has done quite a bit with, and should continue perhaps to do, but not through the EDC. With respect to that $15,000 ask, again, in my estimation only, the CFO and I were charged with presenting a balanced budget. The $15,000 will have little effect on the viability of these potential broadband jobs. Of course, the internet service providers will happily accept any monies we're willing to donate. Their bottom line is going to be, what does it cost to put in that infrastructure? And if we can donate $5,000 or more, their cost is less. Naturally, they'll take it. But I do not, in my experience, feel that the absence of a contribution from the county would torpedo an application or even stop an ISP from making an application for funding for broadband expansion. So in a budget where there is so very little wiggle room, you look for those opportunities to save monies. That's why we've made the recommendation that we have to not fund the EDC, to not set aside the $15,000 for broadband expansion, not because they're not important, but because we have to cut somewhere, and we are not seeing the value, in our opinion. And Chairman Anderson mentioned his is only one opinion, so is mine, although mine is shared by our CFO, that is not a good use of our money or limited resources. It's better utilized somewhere else. I also heard it said that if the county withdraws its funding from the EDC this next year, it'll never come back. That'll be it. It'll be done. Maybe. On the other hand, there was a time when there was no Dunn County Economic Development Corporation, and one was created with a clear vision and a partnership, again, between the units, plural, of local government and the business community. I think that can happen again, especially if we come through after next year with a clear budget, a clear approach that will show those partners, hey, it's worth putting your resources into this because you're going to yield something as a result. We're all going to be better off. I also make the observation that while the Greater Menominee Development Corporation is focused on Menominee, Greater Menominee, it is part of Dunn County. The lion's share of the population is here, and most of the businesses are here. The $10,000 will be utilized for economic development efforts in Greater Menominee, it is true. But I'm characterizing this proposal to partner on that as an experiment. Let's see what happens. We need to do something. It seems to make more sense to put some money toward an economic development effort that has at least the promise of yielding a better rate of return in terms of economic development than to keep doing the same thing that we have been doing. And again, I'll repeat myself, for which I'm very skeptical we'll see more than the lights being on and perhaps a person being in the office. I really do not think that we will be able to afford to have any actual economic development activities, economic development efforts made on behalf of the entire county. I would like, if this notion of contracting with a firm works out, if it does seem to have some promise, to see us have a conversation about expanding that out into the full county to include Boyceville and Colfax, Elk Mound, et cetera, to do an inventory of businesses, an inventory of available sites, outreach to those existing businesses, and then promotion of Dunn County as a whole. But it's a mistake to try it without seeing if it's worthwhile, which is why we've made the recommendation that we have. I know this is not an action item, but I wanted to make sure that this committee, which is charged with making a recommendation on external agencies, understands the rationale behind the recommendation in the form of the balanced budget we presented to executive committee. It will be talked about at the next executive committee meeting on Wednesday, as Chairman Anderson said. I'm prepared to repeat my remarks at that time. The executive committee and the county board will do with that recommendation whatever in their wisdom they feel is the appropriate thing to do. But it remains the fact that if we earmark $70,000 for the EDC without knowing how it's going to be spent, without having a budget, without knowing whether or not it's money well spent or not, we simply have no way to know. If we earmark $15,000 for broadband without knowing that in fact it's going to enable more applications for broadband expansion, that it is not a wise use of our limited monies. And so we'll be sticking to our recommendation, and we will see how the executive committee will decide and how the county board ultimately will decide on this issue.
Thank you, County Manager Miller. Dave Bartlett, our County Board Chair, would you like to echo in, or do you have any comments that you care to make at this point to this committee?
I guess I can make some comments. I have mixed emotions of this. I understand that I understand all the good that EDC has done. I also realize, and I've been at the forefront of discussions. I've talked with you, Jim, and others about broadband changing from the EDC to something else. Discussed other options. The same with tourism, which I think you're doing. You made the motion a month or two ago to do that. I think that all helps take some of that burden off the EDC. I guess I totally understand that you're very passionate about it, and you're very passionate about that if we do that $10,000, it's just for Menominee. And I totally understand that. But after I got the budget from you on what the EDC's budget is, and I looked at it and realized that the portion of the budget coming from outside of Menominee, other than Dunn County, is very, very slim. It's like 0.03% of the budget from the other municipalities that belong. So I'm wondering, they're participating, so I know they feel it's important, and I know budget constraints. Every municipality has the same problems with budgets, just like Dunn County or any township has. And villages, I'm sure, are just as bad. But I'm looking at that, wondering. It seems like every time the EDC needed more money over the past few years, it's come to the county and not someone else. And looking at over the past few years, that looks like that's probably what's happened. And I kind of disagree with you, the $10,000 going just for Menominee. I totally agree that'll be just for Menominee. but what happens in Menominee benefits the rest of Dunn County, because the jobs that are created in Menominee are people that live way up by me, by Ridgeland, or Boyceville, or Colfax, or Knapp, or Elk Mound. So it does, if we create jobs in Menominee, it does help the rest of Dunn County. So I guess then we come to the budget, and I ask a lot of questions, and I have asked a lot of questions about where we can save money throughout the budget, because I realize that we can't borrow for operations. I don't want to borrow for operations. I would rather borrow less than more. But I totally understand Supervisor Steen's theory that every time we have to cut, we're cutting services. And I know that. And it's just like this. It's, if we cut this, something's going to get cut that we're going to miss. I realize that. And we don't know what until we get down the road, but we are going to miss something when, you know, if we cut this. But I don't know where to come up with $70,000 extra, or if we fund the $15,000, $85,000 extra. We did discuss at executive one position in HR that was going to be going from full-time to part-time. I believe that was $30-some thousand, if I remember right. I guess if that was cut, that position, that would free up 30-some thousand. I don't know. I've got other questions. I've got a question for Catherine if she's still on later, that I would like to ask her before we leave. But it's totally, it's a budget problem. I mean, if we didn't have a problem with budget, we could do all sorts of good things that we want to do. So it's going to be up to the executive, and then to move it on to the county board, and it ultimately will be up to the full county board. So every one of you supervisors, even if you're not on the executive committee, will get to weigh in, and come October, hopefully at county board, we'll be submitting a balanced budget. And at that time would be the correct time to amend anything you want to amend, and you know that the executive committee has brought forward. But you have to keep in mind, if we add something, we have to come up with how we're going to pay for it. So I don't know. Do you have any questions? That was a lot more than I was going to say,
No.
but I guess I just got.
I will thank you, Chairman Bartlett and County Manager Miller. I wanted the committee to hear from you of what I had heard at the last executive meeting, and you needed to hear it too. As chairman of this committee, obviously, as they all said, I'm pretty passionate about broadband and pretty passionate about Dunn County EDC. And Tom Quinn's on the executive board. We all are. I guess that's why Chairman Bartlett appointed us as chair of these committees, because we are passionate, or we wouldn't be doing our job. And so I will continue to, but as an individual. But I wanted all of you on this committee to hear the dilemma and where we're at. And so I would say to you this now, if I can. Back a year ago in May, if you remember, I brought to the committee, I think, Ann, it was maybe, before, about that Dunn County should sponsor Allison Dairyland here in Dunn County. And we sent in the application and we got approved. It got set back a little bit because they gave Walworth County another year next year to do it. And so we're set back a year, but that would be run pretty well by Extension, Dunn County people here. Katie Wontalk has already done a lot of work, but also Dunn County EDC. So if we don't fund it, then I will send a letter to the Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection and tell them that Dunn County is no longer interested in hosting Allison Dairyland. That's just one of the things we do. I don't think we can expect Extension to do it all by themselves. That's my opinion. I can't disagree with County Manager and our County Board Chair. But I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I will be personally, if we don't fund Dunn County, I will not support Greater Menominee Development Corporation and forget the rest of the county, because we are Dunn County. That's where I come from. County Manager Miller, thank you again. You absolutely understand. County Board Chair Bartlett, thank you. And now for a few minutes, I will open it up to anybody that wants to share their opinion. I said I didn't think this meeting would go long, but I'm willing to stay here because I want to hear from you. So anybody, yes.
I'd like a clarification on the Allison Dairyland. I thought that we had that set up that it was going to self-fund itself through Katie Wontalk's supervision through Extension.
That is correct with no money, but you think it can run without management, without people working on it? I think that's a huge load to put alone on Katie Wontalk. And I'm not saying I'd do that right away, but I'm saying I would work with Katie Wontalk and find out if she thinks she can handle it without help from Dunn County EDC. You're right, Chairman Bartlett. Dunn County was not going to put any money into it, but we sure were going to put a lot of human effort and resources into it from Dunn County Extension and Dunn County EDC. That's my feeling. That was the way I understood it. Yes.
Well, I think that's a totally separate conversation from this budget cycle and what we're dealing with the EDC.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things that Dunn County does that we may support financially or not support financially, but we support with in-kind work. And that may be something that we can do with that also. So, you know, we have a conservation department, and maybe we could talk to Catherine when that time comes in 2 years, whether we could get some help from Extension that we could contract with or whatever. So I think that's totally different conversation than what we're having today for EDC.
I agree, Chairman Bartlett. I'm just saying that is a possibility of what could happen. No, okay, thank you. Members of the committee, anybody care to make any comments? We'll open it up. I want to hear from you.
Jim
Tom
Atkins.
Quinn, I recognize Tom Quinn, yes.
I think Jim Zahns had something he wanted to say. Why don't you ask Jim to speak first? Go ahead, Jim.
All right, Jim Zahn's on.
Well, just my comments were, you know, I guess I understand some of the points being made by Mr. Miller in regards to, you know, the budget's going to have to be cut somewhere. But it's kind of this committee's job, I thought, to kind of determine, you know, whether or not we're going to, we made the recommendation that we wanted to fund the EDC. We did not make any recommendation on funding the Greater Menominee Development Corporation. And so I guess my point is, what's the point of this committee if these decisions are just being made without our input into that decision? I don't understand what we're doing here then.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Supervisor Zahns, the work done by the CRNT is not being ignored, nor has a decision been made contrary to its recommendation. And in fact, the only reason that there's any mention of the $70,000 is because this committee made that recommendation. And just like the recommendations from every other standing committee that oversees a budget that the county has to consider as part of its overall county board, county budget, the recommendations from CRNT are important. You're absolutely right. That's this committee's job. It is often the case that some element of the recommendation from a standing committee ends up not making it into the final budget. That doesn't mean that the work that they did is worthless or that the conversation wasn't important and that the recommendation was ignored. Rather, it is once we get these thoughtful, well-considered recommendations, the executive committee and ultimately the full county board then has to look at the total, has to look at the sum. In the end, all of these decisions boil down to priorities. If we can't do everything, what is most important that we do? That's what the prioritization exercise was about. If we can't do everything, what should we look at potentially doing less of or stop doing entirely? Last year, very painfully, we had to end a program that had been in Dunn County for 30 years, the home care program. But we couldn't make the budget work to continue to support everything. And largely due to that prioritization exercise where county board members said what should be most important, what should be second, what should be third, home care was eliminated at a very painful cost to some residents who relied upon it, at a very painful cost to the county board, I think. I think the same is potentially true with EDC. I can't predict what the county board will decide with respect to the recommendation. It may be when it gets to executive or even to the full county board that the decision is made to fund the EDC for the amount that this committee has recommended. That may be the outcome. Mine and the CFO's proposal is just that. It's a recommendation, just like this committee's recommendation. But I hope that every member of this committee recognizes that these recommendations from us are not without regard to, without respect to, or without due consideration of what the standing committees are recommending. Those are very important. Simply stated, we can't do everything. What do we not do? The county board spoke prior and said, if we can't do everything, this is one of the areas we can look to cut. And the EDC happened to be one of them.
Thank you, Paul. Tom Quinn, you are next.
Thanks, Jim. These are tough decisions, and I see your and other people's passions, and I share them. I actually served on the Economic Development Corporation for about 6 years, and during a time when it went through a lot of changes, positive changes, I think, and became a really, really good organization, which I think still would be and could be, but it's had some real difficult setbacks that are no fault of anyone or anything, just the unfortunate circumstances. And now we have the unfortunate circumstance of a budget, which is really, really difficult and painful. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm a little concerned that the way that we frame if we do move toward the funding of some kind of contracted services as a temporary bridge for economic development, I think we need to be careful about how we outline that. I think it was probably a mistake to designate it as a contribution to the Menominee Economic Development Corporation. It sounded like the way that Mr. Miller was talking about it today was more of a contract for services from a professional company. So there's some way to frame that so it's very clear that we're we're maintaining the mission of economic development, I'd be much happier. Also, there are a number of functions that EDC carries out in terms of appointing people to serve on different loan committees, Momentum West Board of Directors, that sort of thing, that where the county has representation. And we need to give some thought as a committee, and the EDC does also, but I think as a committee, we also need to give some thought. If we don't have a formal Economic Development Corporation staff, then how do we identify and maintain those positions? Because those are really important to the long-term economic development structure and the ability to maintain that capacity as a county. So I'm not prepared to, I'd really like to keep the discussion going with the EDC and the county about what this next year looks like if we don't fund the full $70,000. And then, well, I guess that's, in terms of broadband, I'm really torn by this, Mr. Chair. I totally understand and support the need to expand broadband, but if I really am serious about it, and I look at the budget, and I'm serious about how broadband is going to happen, I have to say that I think that this 15,000, if we had it, would be nice to spend. But if it means cutting something else, I don't think it will have a big impact on whether or not the providers decide to go ahead with their programs or not. I think the issues that face them, as Mr. Miller outlined, are more financial and bigger than just the small amount of money, the symbolic amount of money that 15,000 would portend. And if it meant that could support something else that would have a bigger impact, I would not want to not do that just as some kind of a show of I think maybe misguided or not clearly strategically thought out expression of support.
Thank you,
Mr.
Tom.
Chairman, if I can, it sounds like I'm really listening hard, and it sounds like I need to give a point of clarification on the recommendation in the budget that your county manager and CFO presented to executive with respect to $10,000. That's a budget. It is not a contract. And in fact, it's not expended. It is fully intended that if it is part of the budget, before any money is expended, this committee would be the appropriate one to vet exactly how that's going to be spent. What are the terms of the contract that Greater Menominee Development Corporation has with Cedar Corps? Is it something that we can agree if does there need to be a change to that contract because of the monies that we are contributing? Is it clear we have some say over how that's utilized? And is it in fact something we want to pull the trigger on? Having it in the budget does not obligate us to spending it. It's simply a matter of creating the opportunity to do so. But this committee, I think, would be the appropriate venue for vetting that proposal in a more formal way once we get through, if it gets through the budget process.
Thank you. Thank you, County Manager Paul. Ann, we hear from you. Would you like to make some comments?
I had a few questions maybe, since I'm kind of new to how the Economic Development Corp was set up. And so it sounds like its main functions were to expand current business, attract new business, and retain our current businesses. Were there any metrics, or is, that how many businesses they attracted, retained? And I'm guessing the return on investment is increased tax levies by those, from those new businesses. So was the original intent that it would kind of fund itself through those levies going forward? I'm not sure if that's how that kind of works. So if it isn't like self-funding, I can see where this budget issue is coming into play. But I don't know if that kind of offset or increased income is taken into account with the budget. So I'm not real clear. And so I would think if we did contract with like Cedar Core or Greater Menominee, we would need to put some kind of metrics in so that we were making that money back in some way. But I agree with Supervisor Quinn about the broadband. It is like so important. And I'm not sure if like how we go about it, but I'm guessing we need to focus on the areas that the broadband companies can't make money by putting in the infrastructure, because that's how we're going to provide it to people who, because they're going to put the broadband in, I'm guessing, where they can make money and there's enough customers. So how does the county kind of help get it to people where the broadband companies aren't going to go? So, and I'm guessing that's going to take some money, but I'm not sure how that will work in the future. But yeah, how do we get broadband everywhere? And especially those places where the companies aren't going to want to expand. So yeah, I don't know if the 15,000 will get us into those places, but I'm guessing there's going to be some funding somewhere down the line that we're going to have to help support that expansion into some of those dead areas. So I have more questions, I think, than for the discussion.
Thank you, Ann. I will try to answer a few of those afterwards, but Larry, let me go to Larry. Do you have something else you wanted to add, Larry?
Well, Jim, I got to tell you, I think my thoughts on this whole thing goes all the way back to Stacey Wingfield. I think he addressed our committee at one time, and he was pretty adamant that if you were going to really be effective, you needed to spend $100,000, not 70. When your rental cost is $6,000, and maybe I've got it wrong here, for the office, and your budget for the office is $70,000, almost $10,000 of your budget is gone there. And this partnership, the seat at the table that I've heard at county board meetings time and time again. We want to have a seat at the table. We want to have our input, but I don't think $70,000 is enough money to be effective. And if you can't be effective, you ought to bow out. So I just as soon see it go away.
Mr. Chairman, I can answer to some of Supervisor Vogel's more general questions about economic development. Specifically, no, an EDC does not realize any revenues from new businesses, other than perhaps the participation of that new business in the Economic Development Corporation in the future. The whole point of an Economic Development Corporation, again, a partnership between units of local government and local businesses, is that as businesses grow, as new businesses are added, it helps us all through not just sales tax and property tax, but job creation and all the things that are associated with it, improvements to infrastructure, et cetera. The model that works, and there are models of economic development effort that work, almost exclusively feature at least one person, usually the executive director, who does the legwork of attracting those new businesses or helping those existing businesses expand, or working out programs that entice existing businesses to remain when they're considering going elsewhere. When you have an expert in that field, and it is an area of expertise, it requires experience, it requires years of training and having been involved to be effective. When you have that effective person, you have an effective economic development corporation. When you do not have that person, in general, you do not have an effective organization. Supervisor Bjork just mentioned the $100,000. To attract a qualified person, I think that's the minimum take-home salary for an executive director for full-time, and that doesn't include benefits. So it's more than that when you add benefits, especially if you consider family healthcare costs. In addition to the rent for the EDC, there are the utilities, the other overhead costs, and the staff. There's one person who works in the office, and Supervisor Bjork just echoed something that I said earlier. Even if we were to give $70,000, I think the city is proposing 16,000 as opposed to the 26 it did last year, and the others remain the same. The contributions from the businesses, I think, are mostly limited to just membership fees. There may be some that provide a bit more, but the fact is, as Chairman Bartlett mentioned, it's a very small percentage. I don't think that we have enough money, and we don't even have a budget to look at to see if we have enough money, but I don't think we have enough money to retain an executive director, even in a part-time capacity, for those kinds of funds. So that's the answer as far as economic development. The rate of return is for the community, not to the Economic Development Corporation itself. When you have an effective, by the way, EDC that is bringing in those businesses or helping those businesses expand, it builds. More business attracts business, and everybody does better as a consequence. It is difficult to put metrics on it. Other than the obvious, a typical thing that happens with EDCs at the end of each year, there's a review. What is the growth and development that has happened in the county? New business started here, businesses under construction there, businesses expanding over there. This number of additional jobs were created as a result. Those kinds of things can be presented on an annual basis. And it presumes that some of that, maybe none of that would have happened, but for the efforts of the Economic Development Corporation, or it's certainly that it was a prime player in attracting those businesses or facilitating that growth. We've not seen that here in Dunn County in the 4 years I've been here. So it does beg the question, is this a smart use of our money? With respect, by the way, very quickly to broadband too, you're absolutely right. The bottom line on broadband expansions, the internet service providers are in the business of making money. They generally will wait for there to be a certain number of rooftops before they realize that there will be an appropriate rate of return on their investment on infrastructure. Or they earmark an area that they see is growing and that the potential for rooftops is there. Where they have difficulty is being convinced to do it in an area that has few rooftops, is widely scattered, and there's not much growth potential. That is offset somewhat by the incentives of government, mostly federal, loans as filtered through the state organizations that says, hey, rather than you having to bear the entire cost of this infrastructure, we're going to subsidize you by providing a certain amount of that money, which gets to the areas that would like to get fiber laid in areas where, left to their own devices, the ISPs would not extend that infrastructure. But it's at no cost to them other than maintenance, because they're getting a loan or a grant for that infrastructure or a huge part of it. Even in those cases, though, you will find, and we have found here in Dunn County, there are places, because it is very rural, where the ISPs simply are not interested in going because there's not the rooftops and there's not the potential for the rooftops. And why do it? Even if we get 100% of our infrastructure covered, which is rarely the case, but even if we did, we'd have to maintain it for how long, and we get no return on it. So they simply won't do it. So I repeat and I echo what Supervisor Quinn just said, and you yourself, the $15,000, in my opinion, my professional opinion, is too little incentive to be worth earmarking that money.
All right, thank you. We've had great discussion. I think all of you have presented a great deal of good information and haven't cut anybody short. I'm going to kind of summarize now and try not to change anybody's opinion. I think my purpose was so that you could hear all the different discussions so that when you make a decision, you know, you have good foundation and good reason for it. I just want to echo a few things so you all understand. Every year, Dunn County EDC had an annual meeting, every year except this year. This year we couldn't. We had to schedule 3 times and had to cancel it. That would be the time when we would bring up to 150 people at the annual meeting and we would tell them what progress, show them what we've made. And we had scheduled to have the state broadband speaker, state broadband director at our meetings, which would have been an outstanding opportunity to share with everybody what we're doing in Dunn County, trying to expand broadband. We weren't able to have that. Last year, we weren't able to either really very effectively because Eric was sick. And yet we're supposed to turn around and prove everything. And I didn't see a budget from the Greater Menominee Development Corporation, what they're going to do with the $10,000 that we give them. So what's the difference here? We do have a budget at Dunn County EDC. We do have a budget. And we have enough money, quite frankly. Not anything like Greater Menominee Development Corporation. They got 6 times the amount of money we have, but they don't want to spend it. And yet we're going to give them 10 grand. Jim Anderson won't vote for it. Now, I can understand that if we don't fund Dunn County EDC, I can understand if you don't want to fund broadband, but I will never understand how we're going to give that to Greater Menominee Development and then let them spend the money through Cedar Corporation with a contract, which I don't know the amount, but I'll bet it's close to $200 an hour. And we're going to do that and cut Dunn County? Now, wait a minute. Dunn County Economic Development Corporation was funded back in the late 1990s. Keith Sommerfeld, who was our ag agent here, was on the county board, and he was instrumental in getting Dunn County Economic Development Corporation started. He says, Menominee does it right now with this formation way back when 3 banks came together. And he says, now it's time we expand it to all of Dunn County. And I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Dunn County is who we're working for. And folks, I can understand where you're coming from. You need to understand where I'm coming from because I'm passionate about it. But I'll live with whatever you decide and you vote. And when we have the executive meeting next Wednesday, I kind of had to get a direction where you're all coming from, and I've got that. And so I want you to know that I will be representing this committee at the executive board meeting next Wednesday, and Tom Quinn is also on that board. So he has heard all the discussion and from all of you today. And so we've had great discussion. And I'm satisfied right now that we've had a chance to air it. County managers had a chance to hear from me what my concern is, as well as our county board chair. And that's where I will be coming from. If any of you care to anytime, let me know on your feelings. I want to represent you on the CR&T committee. We might not be unanimous. We did come up with a budget before. I'm sticking to that until I hear otherwise. And that will be it. And we'll live with whatever the full county board of supervisors votes to do. We will all live with that. And we will continue to work together forever, all the time with the new budget. That feelings, I want to represent you on the CR&T committee. Who's talking? Might not be unanimous. We did.
That's you, Chairman Anderson. I think you've got feedback from the YouTube feed coming through.
Oh, I'm sorry. You don't need to hear me twice. I apologize. Once is enough. Folks, it is now 6:20, and I didn't think this meeting would go very long, but it's been very beneficial to me And I think it would be beneficial to our county manager and our county board chair to hear from you as well. You know where I will apt to be visiting, and you have been very informative. So let's wrap it up. Is enough, folks. It is now 6:20, and I didn't think this meeting would go very long, but it's been very beneficial to me. And I think it would be beneficial to our county manager and our.
I'll remote in.
Well, you know, we're.
Thank you, Krista. If you could, remote in and take care of that feedback.
Very informative. So let's wrap it up. Is enough, folks. It is now 6:20, and
It was on Tom Quinn's
Sorry.
computer.
Was that
I
my
muted
fault?
him.
Tom, that
Tom's
was
fault.
you.
Okay, well, folks, any closing comments? I will, if not, I want to remind you that our next meeting is October 12th. And I assume we will probably still be meeting the same way on Zoom. Our executive meetings are person to person, but we do spread out and we have a chance then to be face to face. And that's kind of a little easier to, for me anyway, to meet, and so on Wednesday. But before then, final comments, keep it brief. If there's anything you want to make sure that any of you have, and we'll try to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes. Jim Zahns, any brief final comments?
No, I think I pretty much said what I needed to say.
Thank you, Jim. Larry Bjork, any final comments?
Just appreciate your passion, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you. Tom Quinn, any final comments? Thank you, Tom. And Ann Vogel, any final comments?
I don't think so, no. Thanks.
Okay, you've been awesome. I want to thank Julie very much for always taking the minutes for us and getting them out promptly, and the agenda ahead of time and getting it done promptly. And to Krista Vinn for helping us set up everything here. And to all of you, and to Dave Bartlett, thank you for being here today. Very appreciate your leadership. And to Paul Miller, while you and I kind of disagreed on this issue, I want to thank you. We need to hear all the points and what we're facing. So any final announcements that anybody cares to make? Announcements of anything pertinent to this committee?
Jim, I'd just like to
Dave
add,
Bartlett.
a couple of times it's been mentioned about your budget, and I do have a proposed budget from the EDC, and your revenue was 174 this year. And if Dunn County gave you that 70,000, considering the other asks that you're not getting, it sounds like your revenue would be down to 152.
Correct.
And your expenses other than your director is 90,000. So that would leave you a total of about 62,000 if Dunn County gave you that 90,000 to try to hire a director. And as Larry said, that's quite a bit short of what you need. So I just wanted to point out that you do have a budget, and I've got a copy of it at least. Thank you.
Yes, I thought everybody did. Thank you, Chairman Bartlett, for that. And I would say to you that when the Dunn County EDC board meets next Wednesday before our county board meeting, we have approximately $100,000 in CDs and savings. So I'm president of that. So I will be approaching the board and asking them then, if we don't get the funding, how shall we spend that money? And we think we can still operate for at least another full year or maybe more. Maybe we'll close the office. Maybe our executive director or part-time, whatever, can operate from home if we have broadband strong enough service. But I mean, there are a lot of options, and I suppose we'll have an annual meeting yet in December. That's what we'd like to do, and bring in all these supporters and say, thank you for what you've done in the past. And by that time, we'll know Dunn County Economic Development Board no longer ceased to exist. We hope we helped you in the future, in the past, and now we're saying you're going to have to find other ways to work on this. And I don't mean it in any threatening way. I just mean we have to face the facts just like we're facing the facts with our landfill and waste management. There are times when we can't afford to continue going on. And but we do have about $100,000 that we do have yet in CDs, and our board will determine if we aren't funded, how we're going to operate next year or beyond. Does that answer your question, Chairman Bartlett? Thank you. Any other announcements? Wow, we finished at 6:30 and I thought we'd be done much earlier. However, it was valuable to me. So unless there's no further announcements, I'll adjourn the meeting. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.